just wanted to take a moment here. For those of you who are new, we have been doing these spiritual journeys for, I'm going to say, maybe 10, 12 years. And what we do is we invite people. It could be residents, it could be staff, it could be important outside members of our community to come on and share their spiritual journey. And today we're going to do that. And I have my co-host and co-producer with me, Jim Bell, who's the Reverend from Village Church. And I'm going to have you go ahead and introduce our special guest today.
Well, thank you. This morning it is indeed a special guest. Ina Hardy is a resident at Green Spring for the past 7 years, and I often will ask people, you know, where did you come from? Where did you move here from? And I always expect to hear someplace close by. Ina moved here from Ireland 7 years ago. And I'm sure that you will realize that she's very Irish when she starts talking. But and we are particularly happy to have her here because our program this morning is going to be about not only her own spiritual journey, but a spiritual journey that she shared early on with America's probably greatest preacher, Dr. Billy Graham. So welcome, Ina. Glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So let's start first from your journey. Have you always been active in the church and religious activities?
My father was a commercial traveler, but he also did quite a bit of preaching. And my sister and I used to sing at all his meetings, and he was all over the place taking campaigns. And so right from the word go, I was brought up in a Christian home, and at 9-year-old I received the Lord Jesus Christ into my heart. And it has been a wonderful, wonderful time. Mm-hmm.
So tell us, for those who don't really understand the, I'm trying to think like what Reverend Graham did and what your father and you participated, where there's more like a tent type gathering and you encourage people to come. Can you explain a little bit for those of us who don't really understand or know much about that?
Well, in Northern Ireland, Billy Graham came to for a campaign, and first of all it started off in the YMCA, which got far too small for the crowds, and they moved to the Assembly Hall in Belfast, and he had finished his campaign there. And really, the crowds were unbelievable. Unbelievable.
So what exactly is a campaign?
A gathering of a lot of people. Yeah.
For 2 or 3 days or something?
Yeah, surely. A campaign. Well, it went on for a week. Yes.
And Ina, this was back in the mid-40s, right? 1940s.
That's right, 1944, 43, 44.
And how did you meet Billy Graham?
Well, I had applied to go to Germany with the Allied Control Commission, and I decided to leave home and go to Germany. And Billy Graham came to town for a campaign, and I was asked if I could type some letters for him, which I did, and went to the meeting on the Friday night to give him the letters to sign. And he signed the letters and gave them to me to mail. And he said, can you do some more work for me? And I said, well, I'm going to Germany with the Allied Control Commission, so I may not be here. So when I went home that day, there was a letter from Allied Control Commission to say that they had taken on too many staff, and if I could find myself another job, they would pay me for 6 months. So I was going to Billy on that Friday morning with some letters to sign, and I showed him the letter, and he said, "You're now my secretary."
Wow.
So that.
And this was right when he was just starting to kind of, I'll use the word, take off, right?
That's right.
And gain popularity.
He was with Youth for Christ International at that time.
Yeah, at that time he had not become world famous.
Oh no, oh no, oh no.
That happened, I think, like 1949 when he had this huge rally out in Los Angeles that was supposed to go 3 days, and they had so many people come that they extended it to 8 days. and they had hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And that really started him off here in the United States.
Yes. Well, he came back quite a number of times to Northern Ireland, but you don't see it too much on the TV. It's the other places that you notice.
So you were with him at a time that preceded, like George Beverly Shea, but had Billy Barrows and
Cliff Barrows
Cliff
and Billy
Barrows.
Barrows were with the team. They were part of Billy's team. Cliff led the singing and his wife played the piano.
So in terms of these gatherings, they were like big organizations and with the sole purpose of encouraging people to become Christians, or they were
like a lengthy hour to 2 hour preaching and singing. It was what I guess in modern day we call revivals, where
Bible meetings.
where a preacher would come in, a guest preacher, and do this service. And generally they would be for 3 or 4 days or a week or whatever. And a lot of those people, like Billy Graham and others, built up huge followings. Yeah. It was sort of the precursor to the mega churches today. Although Billy Graham never bought into that mega church system.
No.
So tell us a little bit about the Reverend Graham then. Did you think, so when you met him, he wasn't, as we already said, as popular as he became.
Oh, not at all.
So what was your first impression of him?
He was a real gentleman. He was very nice to me, and I did his work, and he signed the letters, and that was it.
Do you have any stories about him?
Not really.
No, not really.
Only what I've heard recently. You know, kind of everybody knows about.
Right.
Yeah.
So when he would leave to go back to America or other travels, did you continue the relationship? Or?
Yes, he kept in touch with me because Youth for Christ International sent teams over to hold campaigns, like the Palermo brothers and all those guys came over and had campaigns, and I was left in London. And they set up an office in London for British Youth for Christ, and they put me in charge of the office, and I had to arrange campaigns for all these Americans coming over to take services and what have you. So I was.
And Youth for Christ was mainly a movement of high school and college.
Well, not
to begin with.
Not necessarily over there.
Is that right?
There was quite a committee of elderly people.
Oh, really?
And especially like Jock Troop of Scotland, you know, all those wonderful preachers were all there. Yeah, no, there was quite a grown-up crowd really who carried that on.
Why do you think people were attracted to his message?
Well, I have to say that in Northern Ireland, people were very, very interested in evangelical preaching. And if there was any sort of a service, every Saturday night we went to what we called the youth meeting, and it was packed to the door. So in Northern Ireland, and at that time, there was quite an evangelical movement. And those are the people that invited Billy Graham to come, because they knew we'd get a good crowd.
Well, I know that Billy Graham went on then to become very famous in the United States, and I was just reading some about him, that he met and prayed with every president from Harry Truman to Obama, and then of course he was too ill after that, and he's probably got more distinguished awards than any single American civilian,
so. Yeah.
Including the American Freedom Medal and just a large number of them.
Yes.
So would you attend these meetings too, these gatherings?
Yeah, I was in the choir.
You were in the choir?
Yeah, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about it, like get us into a tent. Like what would we experience if we had come in for the first time?
Well, you probably would have enjoyed Billy Graham to begin with, and the singing was very, very good. Cliff Barrows loved the choir, and he made sure that it was a big choir. He used to say, "Can you not bring somebody else in?" You know, and it was huge. And he was very famous then too,
Right.
just as much as Billy Graham, really, because they just loved Cliff Barrows. And he entertained and we practiced after the service. We would practice and what have you, and they would sing specials for the meeting, during the meeting. And
So he would just say, "Okay, now we're going to have a few hymns from the choir."
That's
or
right.
Let the choir take it away type
that's
thing.
right, that's right.
Was Cliff Barrows a soloist himself? Did he sing solos himself?
Yes, he could. Yes, he did. Yes. Beverly Shea wasn't there.
Part of it.
He hadn't turned up before but Cliff Barrows and Billy Barrows. Cliff would sing and Billy would play, but not as much as he was more interested in the choir singing.
Is that
He
right?
was very interested in all these young people in the choir.
And what happened to all these people that came? I know in later years when Billy Graham was having his crusades in the United States, he would send a team into a community beforehand to meet with preachers to set up local leadership to do prayer groups and things after his campaign left. Did he have a relationship with local ministers there?
Oh yes, very much so, yes. That just started a whole different thing over in Northern Ireland, really did. The Saturday night meetings became more famous and more people started coming to them, and yeah.
Do you think the times, because we're talking late 40s,
Yeah.
early 50s, the fact that Europe the world had just ended or
Yeah.
had been at war, and then the war had ended. Do you think that had a bearing as to why he was so popular?
No, I don't think so. I have to say that in Northern Ireland people were very interested in evangelical preaching, and no matter who it would be, if it was a good evangelical service, they were there. And young people were brought up more in church then than they are now, I think, especially at home, because I mean I was in church 2 or 3 times a week. That wasn't anything new for my sister and myself. My father was, as I said, he was a commercial traveller, but he also did a lot of preaching, and there wasn't a year that he hadn't maybe 3 or 4 different campaigns. And of course we had to go and sing, and they would say, "Where are the wee girls?" So we were the wee girls, and we had to go and sing.
The wee girls, that you and your sister?
That's right.
Her sister also lives here at Green Spring.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we should have them come on and sing for us. Do you still sing?
Not really very much. not
Not as loud as you once were.
That's right. That's right.
Now we have a picture, and I'm going to take this down so tell us a little bit about this picture that we have here.
That picture was taken in Boca Raton in Florida. Billy Graham came to have a service. I think he was there for a week, and that's when I made a point of meeting him. Now, he wasn't he hadn't his organisation at that time. He was with Youth for Christ International. And Dr. Torrey Johnson was the minister of the church in Boca Raton, and Torrey Johnson was Billy Graham's boss at that time.
He had a boss.
Billy worked for Youth for Christ International, but Torrey Johnson was he was the one who started Youth for Christ International. And that was taken. Billy was invited down to Boca Raton to take a week's services, and that's when that was taken.
Very cool.
I think that's the first time I met my husband.
So this is your husband with
Yeah.
you?
Yes, I was
Okay.
married late. Yeah.
So how long did you end up working for Reverend Graham then?
Well, 5 years. They left me in London to set up British Youth for Christ. But he was still, and then he had a big campaign in Switzerland, and they sent for me meet another girl to arrange the hotel bookings and all that sort of thing. So,
Wow, I mean, so you, because of that one first meeting, you
Yeah.
really kind of traveled the world then for this.
yeah.
Did you follow his career over the years after you left?
Oh, pretty well, yes. Oh, yes. And had my Christmas card every year.
'Cause I was amazed at one, his accessibility and interest in the political situation here in the United States, regardless of who was president, and also his commitment to he integrated his campaigns even before even when segregation was still a law here. He insisted on his campaigns all being integrated, and refused to go to South Africa for 20 years
Oh,
because of the apartheid there. So I always admired him about things like that.
he wanted me to come and be his secretary, but my parents didn't want me to leave home, so I missed out.
He wanted you to come to the U.S.
Yes.
Wow. Yeah, you know, sometimes those parents, they can.
How did you eventually end up coming to the U.S.?
Well, my niece came over, and I was living all by myself in a nice bungalow in Northern Ireland, and she came over and persuaded me to come here.
Oh.
So, because my sister was already here.
And she was in Florida at that time, your sister?
Yeah, yes. Well, she was in Philadelphia. Her husband was a minister.
Oh, I see.
Yes, and she was in Philadelphia. Then he was transferred to he got a church in this area. So they came to live here. And then my niece, she said, your sister's over there, why don't you come and not be living by yourself and what have you. So that's why I came here.
And throughout the years, your church has always been a prominent part of your life.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
But you and Billy Graham are both out of the same denomination, right? He was ordained Southern Baptist.
I was a Baptist.
You're Baptist also.
Yes, I was Baptist.
I didn't really think Ireland had Baptists.
Oh, yes.
Shows
Oh, right.
my ignorance here. I mean, I always thought, because you hear about the Protestant and the Catholic, and I guess the Baptist is part of a Protestant.
Well, when you talk about Ireland, the Southern Ireland is more Catholic than the north of Ireland. The North Ireland is mostly Protestant.
And so you were from Northern Ireland?
I was from Northern Ireland. And the Protestant was very strong, really, in the north. Yeah.
I remember just recently, of course, watching the Queen series, and they mentioned how Queen Elizabeth was very impressed by Reverend Graham and had invited him to come to the palace to meet her.
She's a lovely Christian person.
I think he was knighted, actually, by her.
It's possible, yes, possible. She's lovely. She's very nice.
So if you had the opportunity, well, I'm going to give you the opportunity. If there are people here that are still kind of struggling with their faith or lack of faith, what would you tell someone?
I would try and introduce them to the Lord Jesus. That's the first step. There are a lot of, in my prayers every night, I ask the Lord to lead me to somebody who needs help. And that's the first thing. Yes, definitely. I would like to be a soldier for the Lord.
It sounds like you have been.
And as his secretary, because you were dealing with more youth-oriented people, did you meet a lot of teenagers?
Oh yes. In the choir, there were a lot of, in the choirs and the services, there were a lot of teenagers. And yes.
Were there any that you met that went on to become outstanding preachers themselves, or outstanding leaders in some way that you can think of?
Can't think of anybody right at the minute. But I'm sure there were.
Oh, I'm sure it's many thousands.
Absolutely. Because after Billy Graham had been there, they started a Saturday night youth service, and it was just crowded. People were.
Did you ever attend any of his crusades once you moved here?
No, no. Too old.
I don't know about that. And what kind of music were you singing back then?
Oh, just the old hymns.
Old hymns?
Yes, just the real old hymns. Yes.
Well, my hunch is that knowing somebody that famous that well and must be an exciting part of your own history.
Yes, very much so. When anybody hears I work for Billy Graham, they want to talk to me.
Well, that's what happened with me. It's when he died, Jeannie Hennepin, who heads the Green Spring Fellowship, said to me that, oh, one of his secretaries lives here, and then she told me about you. And so I immediately sent Diane an email and said, here's somebody we have to get on to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm very proud. And I don't mean that in a
right.
in the wrong way. I'm very proud of having known him. He was a real gentleman, and I'm glad I was able to help him out.
Well,
can you share any private conversations that you had with him that wasn't business oriented?
Not really. I don't remember. I don't. Oh, we had long chats, you know. Somebody, if he'd met somebody and he didn't know them very well, he would say, did you know those people, or where did they come from, or, you know, that sort of interesting things. But other than that, no.
My hunch is that he would say the same thing about you, about being proud to have known you and have had you as a part of his team.
I hope so.
I think so.
And I'm going to meet him.
Right.
Well, we thank you for coming on and sharing your stories with us and your
thank
recollections.
You for having me.
And I just think it's pretty amazing that someone came. She must be one of the ones who've come the furthest to Green Spring.
Right.
If we had a contest, you would be the winner.
From Northern Ireland.
From Northern Ireland. I don't remember ever meeting anyone else like that.
Well, I have dual citizenship, so I was in Florida for 27 years. My husband passed away. I stayed 2 extra years and then then went back home to Ireland for 12 years and then come back again.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your journey.
You're welcome.
We'll be right back after this.